Hi, this is Mark Wiltshire, and thanks for choosing to listen to the Explore Finland radio show. This episode was recorded when I went to visit Kyrö Distillery Company in nearby Iso-Kyrö. This was a suggestion from one of my listeners, Keith, who's recently become one of the co-presenters with me on the Finnish Football Show podcast, so thanks, Keith, for the suggestion. I visited Kyrö Distillery with Satu, expecting an introduction to the company and a quick tour of the distillery. 2.5 hours later, we'd received a history lesson about the village of Iso-Kyrö, learned about the formation and the first 5 years of Kyrö Distillery Company, and spent 90 minutes on a tour of the distillery itself. So I had enough for a 2-part episode. In the previous episode, I learned about the history of the village and the story of the company. This episode, I go on a very detailed personal tour of the distillery with Kalle Valkonen, head distiller, and another of the co-founders of the Kyrö Distillery Company. So let's head over to my conversation with Kalle. Okay, now I'm with Kalle Valkonen, who's the head distiller at Kyrö Distillery and also one of the founders of the company. So, Kalle, thank you for joining me today.
It's good to have you, Mark, here. And
thank you for taking us on a tour of the distillery.
Yeah, because I'm responsible for the production. For me, of course, the key to the whole is the production side and how we actually make the liquids we then send out to the world and, like we want to say, spread the love to the rye.
We're going to be walking through a few different rooms with different procedures and processes going on so that the sound quality will change. At the moment, we're in quite a cool room with an incredible smell of...
Yeah, we are now in the malt storage. So this is actually where the whole process for whiskey on our side begins. So basically... I will tell you a little bit about what was the whole idea behind the company. Not going on the details, but the idea came in the sauna. And the idea behind there was that we were drinking rye whiskey. And then we started thinking about why is no one doing rye whiskey in Finland, even though that would be the most original grain for the Finns to make whiskey of. And we also had this kind of a naivistic thought that actually the only thing, or not the only, but one thing that most of the Finns going abroad miss from their home country is the rye bread. So you cannot really get a proper Finnish rye bread outside Finland. And we thought that if we make the rye bread to a liquid form, meaning making a rye whiskey, then you would always be comfortable also outside Finland, and you could sip the rye from your homeland, and that way ease the pain of being abroad.
And the rye whiskey lasts a lot longer than a bag of rye bread as well.
A rye whiskey, at least you can preserve it for longer time periods, but it's depending of the company and people who enjoy it, how long actually a bottle of rye whiskey lasts.
Yes, that's true. I had an evening with some friends a month or so ago, and there were several bottles, and none of them lasted very long during that evening. So I think we've all recovered now. But
Yeah. So the idea was then that, okay, let's make a rye whiskey like we make the Finnish rye bread, meaning it's 100% rye.
Okay.
And that's something that set us apart from most of the distilleries making rye whiskey. So if we look at USA, they do rye whiskey, and it's normally in the grain bill you still have other grains in. So meaning that you can call your whiskey to be a rye whiskey means that you need only 51% of rye in it, and the rest is normally corn or barley.
And that has an effect on the cost. I guess it makes it less expensive.
Yeah, that has an effect on the cost, and that has effect on the taste.
Sure.
But we are hardcore Finns and wanted to have like the maximal taste of rye in our whiskey as well. So actually everything we do in our process is kind of to preserve the deep, the intensive flavor of rye until the ready product.
I'm surprised being so hardcore that you stopped at 100% and didn't try and push it just a little bit further.
Well, we are still realistic.
Yeah,
so. But yeah, so the first thought is, let's make it Finnish rye whiskey from 100% Finnish rye. And then, because we wanted to use only rye, at least some of it needs to be malted. And because we were single malt fans at that point, we thought, let's make a single malt rye whiskey. Nowadays, due to the EU new legislations, starting like this May, we are not anymore allowed to call it single malt rye, because single malt is preserved only for barley. But it's still 100% malted Finnish rye what we produce here. And we are at the moment in the malt storage where the journey begins for us. So we source Finnish rye malted by Viking Malt in Lahti. They have a maltery there. And
what does that mean, that when you say it's been malted?
Glad that you asked, because the malting is very... Malting basically means that you start to grow the grain. And in the beginning of the growth phase, when it starts to germinate, the grain will have these enzymes inside. So the enzymes which are made for breaking down the starch to sugars, which obviously the grain needs to grow, will develop in the beginning of this malting or germination phase. And of course, when we want to make rye whiskey, we don't want it to germinate only to that degree that kind of the conversion of this enzyme is ready.
Yeah, okay. I felt like it was something I should know, but now you've explained it to me. I never did know that, so that's good to ask. I know there'll be some people listening to this thinking, of course, you idiot, and there'll be others hopefully thinking, oh, I'm glad he asked that because I didn't know. So there's one for you.
Yeah, I hope we can all learn about the process today, something. And the malting is crucial thing for making whiskey, because the enzymes we use in the process for breaking down the starch to sugars needs to come from the grain. So in any form, if you would make whiskey, we always need some part of the grain to be malted. And we chose to do it like the single malt style, or like we like to say, Kyrö malt or rye malt whiskey. And like I said, it's been malted when it comes here. It's quite crispy. You should taste it. So before milling, from each of the batch of the rye, you just take some. We also taste it. That's kind of our first quality control of the grain. So the malt has a specific flavor, and if there is some variation, we know it from right away that, okay, now there is something we should look into. So
whose job is it to taste all of this?
Well, we've got 3 distillers on the whiskey side, and they take care of the daily process, and every time we get a new batch of rye, they just taste it, and it's not very scientific method, but it's your taste is quite precise method actually to kind of know if there is some difference, and if there is, then we will look further into if there is some deviation we need to take into account in the process.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I'll taste it now only for the purpose that I like the taste of rye.
But now we have to give you 30 seconds to actually eat it before we can get your opinion on it.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's quite crispy. I actually the first thing comes to in my mind from the rye malt is actually the hapankorppuleipä. Mm-hmm. You know that one, the Vasa crisp.
They're very thin, sour, crispy sour bread, basically. Isn't it?
Yeah, the crispy sour bread, and it's very dry and kind of a crispy, which is good for the process, because the second step when the malt comes in is the milling, and we want to make it like to a coarse flour, and for that one we use our hammer mill here besides us.
Okay.
And for one batch of rye whiskey which we make here, our batch size is 3,000 liters, meaning 3,000 liters of the mash, the liquid. And for that batch, we need 650 kilos of rye. So the first step is the milling. After that, it will go to the mashing tun. We could actually go to the mashing side to see how the mashing is actually made, and I can explain it to you much better.
Let's do that, because one of the machines here has just kicked in and made it a little bit noisy. So let's head to the...
Yeah, I can switch it off then.
Okay, let's do that.
So basically the mashing is for the conversion of the storage molecules, meaning starch, in the rye to sugars. So like I told you previously, in the malting we form the enzymes which will break down the starch to sugar molecules, and we need those sugar molecules to make alcohol with the yeast. So mashing of rye whiskey has some tricky parts in it, because the rye is very sticky grain to work with. So first step, when the rye comes into the mashing tank, which is basically 4,000 liter stainless steel tank with a very good agitator inside, it goes through a pre-masher. And a pre-masher has a function to moist the rye already on the way when it drops into the tank. And through that, we don't get any boiling of the rye. So it will be evenly mixed with the water on the way when it drops into the tank. In the tank, we then adjust the temperature, optimal for the enzymes to break down the sugars. And for us, the most important enzyme is called beta amylase. And beta amylase breaks down starch into sugar molecules, which are like a sugar molecule long. And through that, we get the maltose. Maltose is a very good energy source for the yeast. So that happens in 63 degrees of Celsius centigrade. And it takes about an hour. So we agitate the rye, mash inside the stainless steel tank with those agitators in 63 degrees. And this rye it's a thin porridge what we have in there. And during this 1 hour, it will turn completely sweet. So we have a sweet liquid containing also all the solids of the rye inside. So it's like the breakfast for the distillers. When they come in here, they might take a sip from the mash, because, well, it's a full grain rye. And it's fairly sweet one.
And it's not alcoholic yet either.
At that point, it's not alcoholic, so you can easily drink that or eat that in the morning. And so that process takes about an hour. And in the process, we also adjust the pH of the mash to be optimal for the conversion of the sugars by adding a little bit lactic acid into the mash. So very simple process. After the 1 hour, we start cooling it down. At that point, we are at the 60 degrees, but we want to go down to 20 degrees. So it's a good temperature for the yeast to go in. So basically the first step, mashing, turning the starch to sugars. Second step, cooling it down. Third step, we add the yeast to the mash. And now comes the most important part of the whole process, and that's the fermentation. So during the fermentation, the yeast cells eat the maltose in the mash and break it down to CO2, which of course evaporates, and to alcohol molecules. And during that process, it also forms some aromatics, which we want to have in our final product as well. Our fermentation takes place in the steel tanks, and it takes up to 6 days. So basically the alcoholic fermentation is actually almost over in 3 days. So after 3 days, we already have this 9 to 9.5% of alcohol in the liquid. but we will extend the fermentation time to 6 days to get even more aromatics in. And that comes through the natural lactic acid bacteria which are present in the rye malt. And during these days from 4 to 6, we have a lactic acid fermentation forming lactic acids. So actually after the fermentation, we have this rye mash 9.5% of alcohol, but it's also like a really acid potion. So you really don't want to drink that one.
And so far, that's all happening in the same tank as well.
Well, okay, I stepped that one.
Okay.
We just after the mashing, after it has been cooled down, we will transfer it to one of the fermenters.
Okay.
Which we have actually at the moment. We have I have to count 5 fermenters, from which 3 are like a double batch fermenters. So the smaller ones hold 3,000 liters. The bigger ones can hold one like a 6,000 liter batch. And so with the 6 days fermentation, we can do up to 9 batches of whiskey a week. And the next step after the fermentation. So why the lactic acid formation in the fermentation is important comes actually in the distillation. When we have some acid and lactic acid in the mash during the distillation, which will be obviously the next part of the process. During the distillation, those will form with ethanol, and these acids will form esters. And esters are these like a flower or fruity flavors we will have in the new make, in the whiskey we make. So the fermentation now 6 days, after that 9.5% alcohol in the mash. The whole mash will be pumped into our beautiful this pot still, and this pot still can hold up to 3,000 liters of the mash. And like you can see, it's made from copper. It's not only for looks. Not only for looks. So copper was originally used for distillation for the stills, because it was easy to form the shape from the copper, and it was also good. It has a very good heat transfer, so it was easy to heat up and use it for the distillation.
It's an interesting thing. It's also almost shaped like a pestle and mortar that you use for grinding up herbs or something like that. A big handle on top and a weight, like an old-fashioned weight that you would use for weighing things on a scale. I
don't know, Mark, if this will clarify for our listeners how it actually looks like. But yeah, it has this kind of, we call it like a neck or neck of the still, which this one has this kind of a round shape, which is actually quite familiar from like a pepper grinder.
Yeah, pepper grinder is even better. Well done. Yeah, that's a much better description. Maybe Satu can take a picture of one of these. She's nodding.
Yeah,
she's already done it. Good stuff.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, and so we basically have 3 parts in our one pot still. So of course we have the pot where the liquid goes in. We will heat the pot, so start boiling the mash. Then we will have the neck, which looks like the pepper grinder, and so that's kind of the head space. So that's where the alcohol fumes go up, and then there's a pipe going to this column on this side, and that's actually our cooler. So we put in cold water from downside, and the alcohol vapors come from up
this
there.
Is the distillation process. I learned something in my science lessons.
Very good.
30 or more years ago.
Yeah, so this is the distillation process, and in the condenser, the alcoholic vapors will be again condensed to a liquid. So in the first step of our distillation, so we use double distillation, which is the typical method that the Scots use making their single malt whiskey. And we chose this method after experimenting with the different kind of methods and found out that actually we get the most round, most full-bodied taste with using this pot still distillation method. And I was coming to that actually the use of copper has a function, not just looking neat from outside, but once people started using stainless steel, and they were of course making stills from stainless steel, they noticed that actually the flavor is not so good when you use completely a stainless steel distillation apparatus. I will switch off the motors. So basically, the reason for copper is actually that it works as a catalyst, and that one it degrades if we have sulfuric compounds, which we will have normally always when we have a fermentation. There are some degree of sulfuric compounds in there which are highly volatile, and the copper surface inside the hot still will then turn these sulfuric compounds to solid ones. So if we peek into the still, we will see that actually the layer inside is completely black, and those are the sulfuric compounds which we get rid of by using copper instead of using only stainless steel. If you go to a modern distillery having these big columns, and those are normally made from stainless steel, but they always have at some point of the process they call it catalysator, which is then packed with like a ground copper, having a lot of copper surface to do the same effect than we have in these neat-looking copper stills. So the first distillation is just for that we can separate the solids from the mash, the alcohol, and all the flavor that can be distilled will be transferred to the low wines, which is the distillate from this first step of the process. And the low wines we distill until we've evaporated all the alcohol from the mash. And the distillation is kind of based on the fact that the alcohol boils at 78.3 degrees, whereas water boils at 100 degrees. So once we start to heat up the pan, the alcohol will be evaporating first. But of course it doesn't mean that only alcohol evaporates. There's going to be a lot of evaporation of the water, and after the first distillation we will have like a triple amount of alcohol in our low wines that was in the original mash. So in our case that means that we start with 9.5 and we end up with around 28% of alcohol in the low wines. Yeah. So from one batch, 3,000 liters, we get approximately 1/3, so to be exact, 950 liters of the low wines. And that was the first step of distillation. Then the second step, the second distillation, we will make in this little bit smaller one, smaller pot still. It looks exactly the same, it's just slightly smaller. And in this process comes now the kind of the art of distillation into picture. So we load in the low wines, and then we load in the heads and tails from a previous batch. I will tell you soon what the heads and tails are. So in the second distillation, we have now 28% of alcohol. We start distillation, and this time we make cuts. So we separate the alcohol coming out from the still in actually 4 cuts. So the first cut is methanol cut. So we call it methanol cut. It's always the same amount of liquid, and that's just to make sure we don't have any methanol in our process accumulating and therefore coming into the spirit. So, and actually for the methanol cut, we also have a use nowadays. So all the waste alcohol, which we cannot use in our process, we will send out to ST1, which is a biofuel company, and they will make alcohol for biofuel from those distillates.
So you're finding a way to sell your byproduct?
Well, we are not selling it. They they take it. So it's otherwise it would be kind of a waste material for us. So they take it for a good purpose.
But it's interesting, this kind of circular economy where people are finding ways for their waste to be used by another company that uses that and turns it into something else.
The other waste, actually, the biggest amount of waste is, of course, after the first distillation. So we've evaporated the alcohol out from, and we still have like 2,000 liters with these rye solids inside. There are some proteins from the yeast, some fibers from the rye which cannot be fermented, and this one we use as a cattle feed. So a local animal feed company takes up always the pot ale from us and uses for a cattle feed for actually a farm or a place where they are farmhouse where they are growing some cattle, and actually some Mangalitsa pigs eat our waste material, the pot ale. So almost everything comes out from the process. Also the side streams have some kind of use, and that's also what we try to do, like that there is actually not that much waste coming from the process.
When my kids tell me that they don't like science, science is boring, or I'm not good at science, and then you think of everything you've been describing so far, that's just taking me back to certain things that I learned in school. Yeah, science can be fun as well, can't it?
Science is extremely fun, yeah. And my background is actually, I'm not a distiller I'm from a profession, but my education is actually in biology and environmental ecology. And of course, having that background, I also pay a lot of respect to our nature, like we all should, but also when we try to optimize our process, we try to optimize it so that we don't generate any waste streams.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
And of course, kind of having a science degree in microbiology, it's very good for the first step of the process, for the fermentation, and probably that's why I highlight that actually the fermentation is the part of the process where the aromatics are formed. And the distillation is then just kind of separating these aromatics to a set we want to have them.
So the fermenting is where the magic takes place?
Yeah, the fermenting is where the magic takes place. Using a different type of yeast strain, we can variate the process really much. So the yeast is very good friend of us, and we like to take care of the yeast. So that's why, I didn't mention earlier, in our fermentation, the alcoholic fermentation, it's not very energy efficient process. So the yeast will generate a lot of heat during the fermentation, and we cap the temperature in the mash in our fermentation to keep the yeast happy. So we don't want the temperature to go too high, because then the yeast will be kind of like a supercharged. It will work faster, and when you work too fast, you start to produce some of the aromatics which wouldn't be that good for our product. So also in the fermentation, we like to have a good control of what's happening inside.
You were talking about cutting the methanol.
Yeah, that's true.
And then there was something else. There was something else at that stage. We went off on a tangent, but let's come back.
Let's come back. So the first cut, the first drops coming out from the second still, that's the methanol cut. After that, we start to recover the heads. Heads still have a lot of oils from the previous distillation. They actually it's like a nail polish remover type of smell which we have in the heads. So that's obviously things we don't want to have in the final product. So we put those aside. And actually the nail polish remover is kind of a signal molecule for us. So once it fades out from the distillate coming out from the still, we know that now it's time to make the second cut and start recovering the hearts, which is like its name, the hard part of the distillation. And that's also the part which we will then use for making whiskey. So what happens actually in the distillation, the first drops come out and we have a very high alcohol content. And when we start taking up the hearts, we will be around 70% of alcohol in the liquid. And then we will continue recovering the hearts until the alcohol percentage of the distillate drops to around 60. And after that, the taste starts to change to a way we don't, which is not pleasurable anymore. So it's like licking your concrete garage floor. So you know this taste. If you don't, then
I'm not that familiar with the taste of my garage floor,
but what actually is happening is in the veins, in the tails, we start to have like this long chain fatty acids in there, and that it's not the pleasurable taste anymore. Okay, now we made again one more 15 minutes, so we switch off the motors again and continue with that one. But I just say one thing about the tails. So the heads and tails, like I said in the beginning, those still have a lot of taste which we like, besides these molecules which we don't want to have in the distillate, obviously. And it has a lot of alcohol. So when we recycle the heads and tails always to the next batch, we will have higher use of the alcohol, but we will have also more bold taste in our new make, in the distillate which we use for the whiskey.
Interesting. Okay.
Should we actually peek into our barrel storage to talk about the whiskey maturation? Because at this point we only have like a strong alcohol, but it needs at least 3 years in a barrel.
Let's go and see where alcohol becomes whiskey.
Brilliant. Okay, so now we arrive to our barrel storage. This one is actually, we are also in an old dairy, and this room was used for storing ice. So they were sowing ice from the river in the winter time, bringing it into this room, covering it with the sawdust, and the whole summertime they could use that one to cool down the milk.
Standing here now, it feels quite frigid in here anyway, so it's no wonder that the ice would last a few months down here.
And you can also see that the walls are so inclined, and that was the way that when the ice was melting, it packed inside more tightly, and everything was obviously covered with the sawdust. And this one is our smallest barrel warehouse. We are having here barrels made from oak, mainly New American oak, and they vary in size from 30 liters to 200 liters. Like said previously, we need aging to make whiskey. So in EU and in Finland, it means if that you can call an alcohol whiskey, it needs to be at least 3 years old. 3 years matured in a wooden barrel, no larger than 700 liters. So that's kind of the definition of whiskey aging.
You said new oak, but are they, or some whiskies use barrels that have previously been used to store wine or something like that, to take flavour or colour from the barrels? What about the barrels you use here?
So the barrels we use here, we found out that actually the New American white oak works really well with the character of the rye spirit we have, because the rye has a lot of these peppery, earthy flavors. So what we gain from the barrel using this American oak, we get more this coconut, vanilla flavor, more sweetness than from an European oak. So that's why we've chosen to use mainly American oak. We also have some experimental stuff with wine barrels, but that would be a completely a second podcast to go in detail on those.
I think we've already got at least 2 episodes from today's visit, so maybe some other time.
Yeah. So we can say that they are like, if we want to simplify things, what we need to, because I don't know exactly what's happening in the barrels. If we go to a chemical level, what's happening exactly at this moment in this barrel. But there are three main processes happening, and one is the evaporation. So we start losing alcohol. When it goes to the barrels are made from wood. The oak is chosen because it's actually very good holding water or liquid inside, but also for the taste. So when it goes inside, like we can smell here, the alcohol starts to evaporate.
So it's leaking through the wood? It's
leaking through the wood, slowly, and we talk about some 2 to 5% of the alcohol what we have inside in a year. So it's a quite a big loss in a longer maturation. But it's not only a downside. We also want to have some degree of evaporation from the barrels, because we get rid of some of the taste molecules which we don't want to have in the final product. So the taste gets more refined also through the evaporation. We are losing some of the alcohol when it goes into the wood inside. And the other place where we start losing things is actually in the inner surface of a barrel. So we are looking here at a barrel stave, like one wooden piece from which the barrels are made of. And as you can see, the barrel from inside is burned to charcoal. So there is a thin layer of charcoal inside the barrel. So there are a couple of reasons why they do it. The main reason is when you heat up the wood, it starts to change the molecules, the wood sugars, and they get more liquid form or extractable form that we can get them into the alcohol. But actually what I wanted to talk at this point was that this charcoal layer here works like an active charcoal. So basically, if we still have some of these sulfuric compounds from the distillation, if the copper didn't do its work completely, this layer in the wood will take up the sulfury notes. Okay, so we start losing stuff. Some degree of evaporation is needed to make a good whiskey, but then we are gaining some more taste. And like you say, the color actually comes always from the wood. So after the distillation, the distillate is completely clear. And when we put it into the wood, we start to get this nice brownish color to the whiskey. And depending on what the barrels have been used previously, also affects how much of a color we get in there, or which wood it's made of. So if we look at our whiskey later on, we can see that it has this like a really dark copper brown color. Yeah. So when we use these new American oak barrels, which means that they haven't been used previously, we get a lot of color from the wood, but we also get a lot of the wood sugars. So we get the vanilla, we get the coconut flavors, we get a lot of caramel to the whiskey, and
that's from the sugars in the wood.
That's from the lignin molecule is very important, cellulose, hemicellulose, and from those molecules we extract something to the liquid.
Yeah, okay.
And that's also like science is fun. I have to say, and it's a really like a complicated process if you want to go in detail in it. So we are gaining some more colors. But then the third thing happening in the barrel, that's kind of the most, that's the one which we cannot trick so easily. And that's not the evaporation, but it's the chemical reactions. So when we mix this alcohol, which is not completely pure, so we have a lot of flavor molecules in it, we get some sugars and other molecules, tannins extracted from the wood, and then we have oxygen because the barrels are breathing a little bit, and those are like a very, very slow chain of reactions inside the barrel, and that's actually what kind of develops the taste. That's how we get something else out from the distillates, what we cannot perceive in the beginning, which we cannot perceive from the extract of the wood, but that's kind of the evolution of the taste molecules present in there, in the presence of oxygen through these oxidation chains. And that's how we get like, in our whiskey we have this kind of a honey waxiness, a little bit some apricot, other dried fruits in it, and that comes through the oxidation chains in the barrel. So the 3 years time is the minimum, but we like to say we always store the whiskey as long as it's good. But we are also not aiming to storing the whiskey for 12 years, but we are aiming to make a really good whiskey.
And I can see that they've got the kind of the stopper at the top of the barrel. How often are you testing what's inside the barrel?
In the beginning, we start to test the barrels after like 1 year maturation, and depending on the barrel, what's the size of it, what's the history of it, we decide the frequency we really look into the barrel. So normally it's about a half a year. For some it's a lot longer, but when it's getting closer and go closer to be ready whiskey, we will increase the frequency and try to find the optimal time to take the liquid out from the barrel.
So you're testing it to find when each individual barrel is ready.
More or less so, yeah. Yeah, basically all the barrels are individual. So it's been really mind-blowing to see how like we've been filling similar kind of barrels. They should be completely the same, and we have 10 barrels in the same environment for 3 years, and in some of the barrels the taste is completely different to the others.
So as much as there is science, there's still something mystical going on there.
There is some mystical going on. Of course it comes partly from because the barrels are wooden, and depending from which part of the oak the staves are made from, has there been something in the drying process of these particular staves, and all that affects also to the flavor of the final whiskey. And there is always this unknown part, but we already know quite a bit of the aging and how an individual barrel will age once we've tested it a couple of times. But there are always nice surprises, sometimes not so nice, but we can kind of quite well already define what will be kind of the average whiskey coming out from a certain type of barrels.
So people that have invested in a barrel, because I know in the very beginning that's what was happening, they just have to be patient until it's ready.
They just have to be patient until it's ready. And for the customers, so we are actually in the customer barrel warehouse. So these all belong to some groups of people. And they get to taste their whiskey or their distillate aging every 6 months. So that's kind of a unique way to see how the whiskey develops, because normally you only get the final product, and then you try to look at the label and see how it's made. But when you have your own barrel maturing here, and you can taste how the taste evolves during the time period you age it, that's a really unique journey.
Yeah, they go. I was going to say they go on the journey with the whiskey from the beginning. Interesting. And
we also give them a recommendation that now it would be a good time to take it out from the barrel, or we recommend them sometimes in some cases, because we use with the customers smaller barrels, and sometimes we get too much wood impact to the whiskey, and then we recommend them to maybe to transfer the liquid to a bigger barrel and combine it with a couple of different barrels. And that's how we can guarantee that the whiskey they've been investing in will be the best quality possible.
Okay, where do we head to from here?
So basically we've been through the whiskey process now, but I want to mention that we are actually expanding our whiskey production.
Okay.
And hopefully the new distillery will start at the end of this summer. So it's not far away. It's just the building next to the old dairy where we are located at.
Just across the
just across the yard.
Opposite the front door from the building.
Yeah. So like 20 meters apart.
Okay.
And that was 2017. We were in Scotland and looking at all those beautiful old distilleries there, and we thought like, if we want to make the rye whiskey, the Finnish rye whiskey, to be really something and available for people also outside Finland, we need to increase our whiskey distillation capacity. So we decided that there is a need for Finnish rye whiskey.
There is a need, yes.
There is a big need for that. So we decided to invest in a new production facility, which will basically replicate the same process we will have there on this side, what I've been explaining. But it's a slightly bigger size, so we have tripled the size of the batch and tripled the size of the stills, and it's a very interesting process. So if you're around later this summer, that will be a very good opportunity to come to see the new facility.
I think that I need to make the opportunity to come here sometime in the summer. I'm thinking that when my parents are here to visit in the summertime, that might be the ideal time to come and come and check it out. And we haven't even talked about gin. We've been talking for nearly 45 minutes or maybe longer.
This was supposed to be only 30 minutes. But let's go to the gin distillery. I can explain the process to you.
Okay, let's do that. Yeah, so now this room again, it sounds different and it smells different. There's just something, as someone who drinks more gin than whiskey, it just catches the back of my throat.
Isn't it nice here in every room you have a little bit different aromas?
Yeah, that's true.
So sometimes when we have parents with small children, the aromas are just too much for the kids. They are like, oh, can we go? It smells horrible.
It's interesting because we live in Seinäjoki and there's the huge grain storage there. So depending which way the wind is blowing, you get that smell. And I used to live in Northampton in the UK, and there's a big Carlsberg and John Smith's brewery there, and it was the same thing. You'd get this waft of oats and malt or whatever it was coming across, and I didn't used to like it so much, but like I say, I'm growing up, and my tastes are maturing, and now the smell in here, I've enjoyed.
There's a lot of the botanicals. There is no alcohol in there. We measured all the time the alcohol level in the air because it's a safety issue. So by smelling these nice aromatics actually coming from the herbs we use for the gin, so that's what we can sense on this side. Yeah. So don't worry, no alcohol in the air.
We're driving home, and now it really came as you closed the lid. Yeah. Then something really hit me. Okay.
Yeah, they've been starting to ferment there a little bit. But the whiskey process was on the other side. Now we are on the gin side in this nice herbal aromas. And this side we built between 2015 and 2016. So once the Napue took off, Napue is the name of the gin, and there was a huge demand on our gin after we won like the Gin and Tonic trophy with the Napue Gin and Tonic in International Wine and Spirits competition. And that was back in 2015 in July. And over the night, the demand on Napue in Finland skyrocketed. And at that time, we only had this one still, which we were using for both whiskey and gin. And that made us also, for the 1 year, just to produce gin and not whiskey at all. So the whiskey side is much younger, or not much. So we started that production on that side 2016 in August. And since that, we've been producing continuously whiskey. But at that point, we decided to build a separate gin distillery as well to keep up with the demand, to make our product even more kind of quality, more stable. And so that's why we needed a more kind of a design process for making gin. So we basically took the distillery from that side, adjusted it for making gin, and built this beautiful distillery here. We are on the riverside, so there is behind the steel bars. Yeah. Those are needed because the customs, so it needs to be like
of course.
Protected from breaking in. But behind this big window, we have the Kyrö River and a lot of light flowing in. But let's get to the point. Let's get to the gin. So on the gin side, we start with rye-based alcohol, but it's distilled to 96%. So there is still rye taste, but it's mainly like just a base alcohol for making gin, because in the limelight for gin, we of course have the botanicals. So gin is by the definition a spirit that has juniper taste. So juniper is one ingredient you always need to have in gin. Other restrictions there ain't that many. In our gin, we wanted to kind of bottle the Finnish summer. So we thought when we are in Finland, we need to use this pristine nature we have here, all the botanicals we can find, all the berries, which are quite unique for this northern hemisphere. And so we designed a gin which is kind of a Finnish summer in a bottle. And I was developing it with Mikko, one of the other founders, and we came with this idea like, let's go back to our childhood summers. Which kind of smell we had there? Of course, there was sauna. So bathing in sauna, which botanical we have in the sauna? We had birch, so birch leaves. We use fresh birch leaves for our gin. Then we use meadowsweet. That's kind of a weed growing besides the streets and in all the moist places in Finland. It has a very intense aroma. So when you smell our gin, the first kind of aromas you're getting from there, that's actually coming from the meadowsweet. Okay. So it gives some sweetness. We can smell it later on. And then we use some cranberries. That gives a little bit acidity to the taste. And then also from the local ingredients, we use sea buckthorn.
Okay, yeah.
And the sea buckthorn is actually quite nice little berry, which makes actually what it makes to the flavor. It kind of binds them together and packs the flavor. So we can actually put much more flavor in the gin what you can perceive when you taste it neat. Okay. And once we add a drop of tonic in it, or more tonic, this aromatics which have been kind of bound together with the distillate from sea buckthorn will be released. So we have a nice aromatics in the gin when it's drinking neat, but then we have like I would always like to call it like a tip-packed computer or some file which you can then open and you have much more inside. Actually.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think next time that we go out somewhere and have Napue gin and tonic, maybe we should just take a moment to actually take in the aroma as well.
So basically the gin process starts with the alcohol. It will be diluted down to 46 ABV. At that ABV we will add botanicals. So we have 10 dry botanicals in our gin recipe. Those have, for example, in the juniper we have some local coriander, we have some cardamom, we have some Ceylon cinnamon, we have some caraway. We have a little bit of dill, also local. We've got some orange fruit, and we got some licorice fruit. So there are quite many botanicals. I won't list all of them because I always forget some one or two. So basically 10 dried botanicals, steep in the alcohol for 16 hours. We get them moist, and we get the aromatic compounds extracted from the berries and from the botanicals into the alcohol. And after that, it will be pumped in one of these copper pot stills. So it's very similar looking than on the other side. This one is only slightly smaller. So this one can hold up to 1,200 liters of liquid. And once it's in the still, we add 2 more botanicals, and they come in like an aroma basket, which we will put inside the head of the still. So when we start distilling, all the alcohol vapors will go through this basket and extract the aromas from hibiscus and elderflower.
Okay, interesting.
So after the distillation process, we will make same cuts than on the other side. Well, on this side we don't have any methanol, so there is no methanol cuts, but we will cut the heads, the hearts, and the tails. So on this side, the heads and tails will be disposed, or they go for the biofuel company, and the hearts will be used for the gin. So after the distillation, we have 12 botanicals in. That's what we call our base gin. And we prime it with these fresh botanicals I mentioned in the beginning. So that was the meadowsweet, birch leaves, sea buckthorn, and cranberry. And actually one not so local, we also have a tiny bit of orange peel distillate in it. And also made from fresh orange.
And how long does that process take?
So basically the steeping or the maceration takes 1 day. The second day we can distill. After that it will be adjusted. Our distiller Jonas who is there and is all the time harassing us with some kind of background noise there. He checks that the flavors are right. It will be pumped on one of these big steel tanks here, and we will blend in then like 18 to 20 batches in one of these big tanks. So that will also balance the flavor. And after 2 weeks, it will be quality tested. So we have a panel, so basically consisting from co-workers here. They will taste it blind against, how do you call
it? Like a reference.
Like a reference sample, which is a reference of the wanted product. And if they can see that there's a difference between these two when they're tasting it blind, then it will come back here. But if there is no difference found in the blind tasting, then it will be approved for bottling.
And so it could be within 3 weeks that it's bottled? Yeah,
so basically it takes up like 3 weeks when from the day we start the distillation when it can be bottled.
Yeah, that's good for business, especially when you've got high demand for it as well.
It's much better for business than whiskey, especially when you're starting up the business.
Yeah.
And on this side, we wanted to make sure that there is enough capacity. So at the moment we are running the still roughly 10 times a week, but we can triple the distillation on this side if needed. We do also a barrel-aged gin, but that's a whole...
That's a whole nother podcast in itself again.
That's again a second episode of this. Let's just go all the way to the other end of the hall, and that's where we have our bottling hall.
Okay. Now we're at the kind of the final stage of the production, the bottling.
Yeah, that's the kind of the final stage of the production, and that's our bottling room. When we first started, 2014, we bottled 5,000 bottles, and that was all hand bottled. We had a small bottling machine there, and all the labels were put just with the hands on top, but now we have this fancy bottling machine here. So we do all our bottling ourselves. All the distillates we produce here, And the bottling has a couple of steps. So the first one is, of course, rinsing the bottles. The bottles are quite clear when they come to us. That's actually our, for us, a design bottle model. But for the rinsing, the idea is to, if there is some dust inside, we get rid of that. Then we have a filling. After that, we put on top of the cork with the machine as well. After that, we put the plastic seal on top and the labels, front and back label. So this work is not done manually anymore, which is nice, and we can produce up to 5,000 bottles a day here. So we can bottle 5,000 bottles when needed. At the moment, we do 3 to 4 days of bottling in a week.
So the first year was 5,000 bottles in a year.
Yeah.
And now you can do 5,000 in a day if you need to.
If we need to. Last year we produced a little bit less than 450,000 bottles, and most of it is the gin, our Napue gin and our Koskue gin, and those together are over 95% of all the production.
Because then the whiskey is taking that time to age in the barrels, and it doesn't come through a production line quite like the gin.
That's a whole different game, and unfortunately this year we will have only 2,000 bottles of whiskey to be bottled, but next year, because we've been increasing the production 2016, so next year we can tenfold that amount. Yeah. So next year there will be more Finnish rye malt whiskey available, and the year after that we can go up to 100,000 bottles a year.
Because you've got also in 2022 will be the third year after this big new distillery over the road as well.
Yeah, well, that will be most likely 2023, but after that we can then again go to 500,000 bottles a year, which is then a decent amount of whiskey.
Okay, whiskey fans, so you've only got, let's say, 4 years to wait before there will be plenty of
Kyrö
malt whiskey to go around.
Yeah. So, but with the whiskey, you need to be patient.
Kalle, thank you so much for your time. You give me a lot of your time.
Okay, I
really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And I found it fascinating. I think Satu has as well. She's got a big smile on her face. Yeah, she doesn't talk much on this podcast, but she smiles in the background.
Yeah. So that's also good to have a smile in the background.
It is indeed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
So I think that just about wraps up today's show. I'd like to say thank you to Kalle for a fantastic experience. If you enjoy the show, you want to show your support, then please take a minute to rate and review the show on iTunes or wherever you find your podcasts. It will help me raise the profile of the show. Connect with me on Facebook, that's Explore Finland Radio Show, Twitter @Explore Finland, and Instagram, which is Mark_Explore Finland, or on the website explorefinlandpodcast.com. Of course, you could also spread the word to your friends on your social network of choice. Let them know about the show and invite them to explore Finland with us. And also, if there's a subject you want me to cover in a future episode, you can contact me via the website or social media, like Keith did. I'd be happy to hear from you and your ideas. If you want more, search for your podcast player for the recent Attarizu podcast mini-series or the Finnish football show. Otherwise, until next time, thanks for listening and see you again on the Explore Finland radio show. Bye.